Hello, and welcome to this video, which aims to answer the question, how could grammar be taught? As Nasaji and Photos point out, this has been debated for 2,000 years, and the debate is shaped by research on second language acquisition. First, I will address the history of different perspectives on grammar leading up to the output hypothesis in task-based language teaching. Then I will provide examples of tasks before giving a lesson plan based on a dictogloss in my own English class. These students are adult multilingual beginners with limited schooling, and the dictogloss has been selected because of the possibilities of adapting it to different levels. The different perspectives on grammar teaching can roughly be divided into three areas or phases: focus on forms, focus on meaning, and focus on form. In the traditional view, focus on forms, grammar is taught explicitly. The view is based on behaviorism, where language learning is seen as a result of outside input. Focus on forms has been criticized by many, for instance by Long, for being boring, for disregarding learners' communicative needs, for including unrealistic language models, and for ignoring language learning processes. Further, it has been suggested by linguists such as Pieneman and Mackey that teachability is constrained by learnability, meaning that what is taught is not necessarily what is learned, and that the time of teaching a language aspect is not necessarily when learners are ready to learn it. As a result, the focus shifted in the 1970s towards a communicative approach. It is also based on input, but it is a non-interventionist approach. It became known as focus on meaning. Ellis explains how this approach used content-based instruction or immersion programs. It emphasized incidental and implicit language learning, and the learner's focus was more or less entirely on meaning, not on formal elements of language. Krashen was one of the advocates for language learning, mainly being a result of comprehensible input, meaning extensive input of target language without the need for producing output. Towards the end of the 1980s, however, results from Canadian immersion schools suggested learners within this meaning-focused tradition would struggle with accuracy. As a reply, Swain emphasized the importance of output. He argued that output forces learners to move from semantic to syntactic processing, and he developed the output hypothesis, consisting of three functions of output. The noticing function, when learners notice a gap in their language knowledge while producing output. Second, the hypothesis function, when learners create hypotheses about language use and test them. If they experience that their meaning is successfully conveyed, the hypothesis stands. If not, they need to create new hypotheses. Third, the metalinguistic function is a claim that producing output encourages learners to think about the what and the how of language use, which in turn makes them more aware of what they need to learn. Long proposed an alternative approach to focus on meaning that he called focus on form. It was an approach to teaching linguistic forms reactively by briefly drawing learners' attention to language forms while working on tasks. More on task-based language teaching in a bit. Long's intention of using tasks in focus on form also resulted in debate, as the term task and the difficulty of defining it caused misunderstandings and misinterpretations. This in turn led to what both Ellis and Long mention as misplaced criticism of task-based language teaching, or TBLT. Ellis points out that TBLT proposes that the primary unit for both designing a language program and individual lessons should be a task. He further points out that most definitions include four aspects of language teaching activity must include in order for it to be a task. First, the primary focus should be on meaning. Second, there should be a gap. And third, the learner should in large have to rely on their own resources. And finally, there must be a clearly defined outcome that is not simply using the language, but rather using it to achieve something. In Long's definition of task, the importance is on real-world communicative uses beyond the classroom. It includes what learners will do in and through their second language, such as using public transport or writing a lab report. And thus, the first stage of TBLT, according to him, should be a needs analysis to identify target tasks. The following stages together make up a lesson plan, which according to Long should stand as a task syllabus alone. Ellis, on the other hand, points out how TBLT is not a method, not just one right way, but rather different approaches depending on different characteristics. There are many examples of tasks designed to push learners to produce output. Nasaji and photos give a thorough explanation on, for example, dictogloss, reconstruction closed tasks, text editing tasks, and collaborative jigsaw tasks. These also have in common that learning happens in a social collaborative environment. I have created a lesson plan for a dictogloss because it can be used to draw learners' attention to grammar in particular. Nasaji and photos provide a definition of dictogloss by Weinrib. The definition shows that the aims of the task are to push collaborative output from learners and to promote negotiation of form and meaning. As learners must work together to create hypotheses, there is a realistic communicative context where they are expected to use meta-language to reflect on their own language output, discovering language aspects they know and don't know. In short, a dictogloss consists of a teacher reading a short text. Learners then work together to reproduce it as accurately as possible. The dictogloss will meet several competence aims in the LK20 curriculum, and some of these include listen to and understand words and expressions in variants of English, ask questions and follow-up input, use knowledge of word classes and syntax, and follow rules for spelling, word inflection, syntax, and text structure. This may seem like a lot to work on simultaneously, but a dictogloss can easily be adjusted to all levels of learners. For instance, my class consists of beginner multilingual adults, meaning the pre-task needs much dedicated time. We start with a discussion of the topic, moving and attending a new school. Then I present and explain unknown vocabulary in the text. At this level, I group them together as antonyms and synonyms to help them compartmentalize. In the pre-task, they are also informed of the aim of the task, which is to reproduce the text as accurately as possible with special attention to verb forms. The text is simple with repeating vocabulary, and the grammar focus is the past simple of verb forms. Thus, this particular grammar form is repeated in the text as suggested by Nasaji and photos. And finally, they are divided into groups. The next part is the dictation stage, when the teacher normally reads the text twice at a normal pace. For my learners, however, I must read it a couple of times more to adjust to their level. The first time, learners listen very carefully, and the second time, they take notes of important words while listening. They are reminded to pay extra attention to verb forms. Then they work collaboratively to reconstruct the text. Working on a dictogloss, learners should be reminded to use the target language, but for learners at lower levels, combining languages they know is necessary. The teacher monitors and gives feedback or language input when needed. The post-task is an analysis and correction stage where the reconstructed text is analyzed, compared with the original, and corrected by the learners and the teacher together. To promote meta-language, learners should discuss their choices. How did they create hypotheses? And how did they come to solutions? The teachers should help learners find and fix their linguistic problems. For instance, can they allocate all verbs? And how about the verbs in the past simple? Using a dictogloss in my class to teach aspects of grammar is in line with focus on form, including TBLT. However, I have not, like Long suggests, constructed the entire syllabus based on a needs analysis for my class. Teachers in Norwegian schools must adhere to competence aims of the curriculum, which may conflict with students' different needs of English. While one student might go on to pursue an academic career, another might become a truck driver. Thus, Ellis's view of TBLT as an approach is more in line with my teaching. Even though my students are beginners, I have experienced on several occasions that pushed output indeed forces them into metalinguistic thinking and talk, like Swain's output hypothesis suggests. They still mix languages they know, but gradually it seems easier for them to comprehend and use language forms because we use meta-talk in our meaning-focused and communication-focused classroom. I believe there are many ways to teach grammar, but with my students, I see the best results using a balance of meaningful input and having them produce comprehensible output. Thank you for listening, and here are my sources.